Welcome back to this training module, and this is in continuation to the series of do-it-yourself videos for facilitators who are facilitating the cluster level federations. After the visioning and after the village level planning, this is the CLF level annual action planning module, which will tell you how to facilitate the CLF level annual action plan preparation, and this video will help as a guide whenever you go and facilitate such a meeting in the CLF. So let's begin with this module. As usual, like in all other training modules, preparations need to be done. As you can see, the VLO level planning charts need to be there before the training, so you have to ensure that those charts are there. The dimensions and the change indicators again have to be placed at the CLF office. All these things would have been done in the visioning exercise, so all the dimensions and change indicators should be there, very visible, because they will be used in this training. You'll have to select an open and a well-lit space for this activity. So if the CLF office has a good meeting room, very good. If not, then look for a meeting place where electricity and lighting is very good, and the women can spend around 5 to 6 hours every day for this training. The necessary training materials, the details of which will be shared at the beginning of every session, they have to be arranged. All the subcommittees within the CLF EC should be there, and they have to be functioning already. So they need to know their roles. The subcommittee level trainings, orientation trainings need to be done. Only then they will be able to play an active role in this annual action planning. And the formats for planning which are there have to be prepared, and printouts have to be taken. And also charts will have to be prepared, wherein this whole format is depicted into the charts, because those charts will be used by the leaders to finalize their plans. Let's move on to the session framework. We have the welcome and introduction session coming up first. Then we have the expectation mapping and objective sharing session. The third session is the review of the VLO AAP documents from every VLO. The fourth session would be revisiting the need for a VLO and a CLF AAP. The fifth session is about finalizing the CLF's own programmatic action plan. The sixth session is about the CLF's functional areas planning. The seventh session is the integration of the SRLM's action plan. And finally, we close with the preparation of the final budget and the monitoring plan for the AAP. We now move on to the first session, and this session is about the welcome and introduction that is going to be given to the participants. This is going to take around 30 minutes, and the materials required are basic chart papers and some markers. In the training hall, make the participants sit in a circular fashion, and first welcome them and ensure that they are comfortable. Also, you can ask them about how the journey to the center had been, so that they feel a little bit more comfortable. And once you have ensured that they are all settled in and they are all focused on the event, then you can request for their permission to start the event. You can start this session by asking them to first introduce themselves, and also introducing their names and also the VLO's name while introducing themselves. This brings us to the second session, which is about expectation mapping and objective sharing. This again is going to take you around 30 minutes, and the materials required are, just like the first session, some chart papers and markers. In the same seating arrangement, you can ask the participants that what kind of expectations or what are the things that you would want to know from this training on the last day. What are the areas where you would want to enhance your knowledge after this training? Listen to what everybody has to say. Ensure that all people participate, and once they have shared their expectations and you've taken notes for those expectations, you can then share the objectives of the training. And if there are any expectations which are not going to be covered, please tell them beforehand that this training will not cover those expectations, and also explain to them which would be that training where this expectation would be answered. As you can see on your left on the blackboard, the objectives of the event are written. First, there should be a review of every VLO's AAP. There will be a preparation of the CLF's annual action plan for the next year. The budget would be prepared and finalized, and there would be some time spent on understanding how this process would be monitored in the next whole year. That brings us to the end of this session. We move on to the third session, which is known as the review of the VLO AAP document. This will take time, almost 4 hours, and the materials required are the previously prepared VLO AAP documents, chart papers and markers. the facilitator has to ensure that before the meeting begins, that charts from every VLO with the plans should be there in the prescribed format to be presented in the next session. In the same seating arrangement, announce to the group that you hope that all the VLOs have completed their VLO AAP at each of their villages. If they have done, request them to share one by one what their VLO AAP is all about. So this would be the time where each VLO representative will come and present their village level organization's action plan that they had finalized in their own. Once all the presentations have been made, please announce to the group that now they have to identify from every format that what are those areas where every VLO has been asking support from the CLF. Those areas need to be listed down, and then the CLF EC members will have to decide whether the support that has been asked would be extended to the VLO or not. And if yes, what are those activities which would be taken up by the CLF in their annual action plan to help the VLOs. This is the first stage of the CLF action planning, where a connect is made between the VLO action planning which happened in the village level and the CLF action planning which is going to happen. This is the session where the VLOs articulate collectively what kind of expectations and help they want from the CLF. The agreed CLF support items to the VLO will be now included in the CLF action planning, and the CLF will gradually have to allocate resources for the same. So this brings us to the end of this session, wherein the VLOs have articulated and what kind of support they want from the CLF, and the CLF has also decided what are the areas where they will be able to provide them support, and they have kept them, consolidated them together so that this can be used as part of the overall CLF annual action planning. This brings us to the fourth session of this training, which is called Revisiting the Need for VLO and CLF Annual Action Plan Preparation. This is going to take about 45 minutes to an hour. Materials required would be whiteboard, chart paper and marker. Start off the session by announcing that let us recap the need for the VLO and CLF Annual Action Planning and also understand its importance in achieving the vision of the CLF as well as managing all the compliances which are necessary for the CLF as it's a registered organization. Help them understand the whole cycle, which began with the first visioning exercise. Then there was an interface followed by the second visioning exercise, which is known as the V2, followed by the third visioning exercise, which is known as V3. And then there was the village level annual action planning, which would be followed by the CLF annual action planning, which is happening right now. And then the penultimate session where the business development plans are finalized, with the final step being that the annual action plan and the business development plan being presented in the AGM and being approved by the AGM before the action on both the BDP and the annual action plan begins. The following flowchart is important because this is what is going to be used to prepare and finalize the CLF AAP. So the first stage is that the VLO prepares its annual action plan, which has already happened. The second stage is the CLF decides the area where they are going to support the VLO. Third stage is the CLF then prepares its own programmatic plan, because CLF also has its own vision and its dimensions where they need to act. They also have their own targets. Fourth, very importantly, the CLF then prepares its own functional area plan. Now these are areas where CLF needs to prepare plans for. For example, there could be HR related plans, there could be certain administrative related plans, there could be certain recruitments that they need to do. So all these things will come in this functional area plan. This would be followed by the fifth segment where the CLF includes the action that the SRLM is requesting the CLF to do for the betterment of their villages or their clusters, and they will include them in their AAP. This would be followed by CLF's consolidating step number 2 through to step number 5 to prepare the final draft cluster level federation annual action planning. And finally, the CLF will finalize the budget that is required for doing all that it is planning, and then they will present it in the AGM for approval by the general body. So this is the flowchart which depicts the steps that are followed in this whole annual action planning. Please remember, ideally the month of February should be devoted to all the annual action planning so that the business planning can be closed in the month of March, and as soon as this year is over, after the audit, we can organize the AGM for the CLF, and all these approvals can be given to the budgets and the respective plans of the CLF. We now go on to the fifth session of this training. This is known as the preparation of CLF's own programmatic action plan. This is going to take you 90 minutes. Materials required are the framework of the planning, the document, the format, chart papers where these documents and the format is replicated, and marker. Start the session by announcing, now it's time to relook our own dimensions and the result indicators that we had set during our visioning phase. This session will allow them to revisit their vision and the dimensions that they had finalized. We have to see which are the areas which are urgent and important for us and need attention in the current year. Also, if the CLF ECs do want any addition or modification in the indicators, they can do so now. As you can see in the screen, the four most common dimensions are coming up. You've got health, livelihoods, institution strengthening, water and sanitation. This is the time when the EC members, if they want any addition or modification in any of the indicators, they can do so now. Take a careful look at this format. This is the format which was used in the village level vision planning, and a very similar format will be used for the CLF level vision planning. So you can see you've got dimensions, then you've got the indicators, then you've got target for the 5 years, and then you've got the activities which would be needed to taken up to achieve the objectives, which is the implementing agency, target for the current year, who's the responsible person or organization to do that activity, what is the time required, whether it is in days or months, whatever it is, which organization are they going to seek support from, the start date of that activity, end date of the activity, and the total expected expenditure that the CLF may assume considering the previous experience. And finally, where to manage the fund from. So whether the funds would come from their own corpus or there are certain schemes where the CLF can take help from. So this is the format which is also used for the VLO annual action planning. A similar format will be used for the CLF annual action consolidation. Now request the EC members to form subgroups based on the different subcommittees which are there in the CLF. So one subgroup would work on the health framework of planning, another subgroup would work on the livelihoods, and two more subgroups would work on two different dimensions like water and sanitation and institution strengthening. So this can vary and will vary from CLF to CLF. There may be CLFs with different priorities. So form the subgroups according to the dimensions that you have finalized so that people can have a fruitful discussion. While preparing the CLF's own programmatic plan, please remember that the result indicators are different than the process indicators, and this activity of annual action planning is concerned with process indicators or the activities that need to be done to achieve the desired change in each of the dimension. So for example, livelihoods, what kind of activities can be done under livelihoods to enhance the incomes of the families. For example, there could be trainings for learning new techniques of agriculture. There could be convergence meetings organized with different line departments. So multiple things can be done. So for the institution strengthening group, activities would be how many times would they monitor the groups, what kind of reports will come from the groups to the VO and VO to CLF, what would be the frequency of monitoring visits that would be done by the VLO and also by the CLF. So these kind of activities would be finalized. For health, the number of meetings that the VLO and the CLF will organize with the health department officials so that coordination can be achieved with them. So these are some examples of activities that can be done to achieve the target. Give them about 45 minutes to present. Take stock after 45 minutes, and if not still completed, then give them another extension of 30 minutes. Once the time is over, then announce that it is time for presentation and give each team around 15 minutes to present what they have finalized. Once the presentations are done, then each of these thematic activity lists have to be consolidated by the CLF into one sheet which has been given as part of the CLF annual action planning. This brings us to the 6th session, which deals with the CLF functional areas plan. Again, 45 to 50 minutes would be required for this session. Materials required are the plan framework and chart paper and markers. Now the CLF programmatic plan is ready. Now we need to finalize the functional areas plan as a group. You can refer to the functional areas sheet to help them understand what are those functional areas. Use the same plan format for preparing this also. So this session would be done as a open session with all the EC members. Once they finalize their CLF functional areas plan, they will then add this to the first item, which was the VLO support area plan, then the CLF own programmatic areas plan, and then the result of this session, the CLF functional areas plan. Now please present the common sheet prepared for clarity among all the EC members. Once this is done, display it in front of the EC members so that everybody can see how their planning is progressing. We now go on to the 7th session of this training, which is the integration of the SRLM action plan. This is going to take you about 1 hour. Materials required are the same. You need to have the plan framework, chart papers and markers. So basically every year the BMMU will have certain activities where they would require support from the CLF. These areas could be the organization of the Poshan Ma or Poshan Pakhwada, just to give you an example, and wherein the CLF also has to take a significant responsibility in organizing these and ensuring that these programs actually see the kind of success that they had expected while designing them. So these kind of areas need to be finalized. For that, the CLF will have to ask the BMMU or the SRLM representatives to share what kind of plans they have for the CLF where they need the CLF's assistance in the coming year. Once that is presented, the CLF representatives will have to add that to the AAP document so that it is very clear as to what are those areas where the CLF has to ensure support to the SRLM. Now, it is time to prepare a common frame by adding the SRLM integration area plan to the previously consolidated plan. So as you can see, the 3 previous consolidated plans were done in the last sessions. And in this session, we'll add the SRLM action plan to the overall sheet and we'll have the final CLF level action plan ready. We now move on to the last session of this CLF action planning, which is budget preparation and annual action plan monitoring. It's going to take you 60 to 70 minutes. Materials required are, like the previous sessions, you need the format prepared in charts and markers for the EC members to fill them in. Since all the action has been finalized, it is but obvious that we now need to understand what are the kind of expenses that these actions will incur. So for that, it is better if we put up the chart where the format has been represented for every EC member to see, and then ask them to finalize what are the anticipated expenses for each activity. So once this plan budget is finalized, this whole thing would then be added to the action plan. Now, it is very important for this whole annual action plan to be presented to the AGM to get its approval. Each subcommittee will divide the AAP into quarterly and monthly targets and follow it up at the village level in close coordination with the VLO subcommittee. As you can see, there is a social action subcommittee which will look after all the social related issues like health, education, PRI, CBU convergence, so that rights and entitlements issues are addressed. The livelihood subcommittee will work on the livelihoods, will make targets for the livelihoods, and also keep a close coordination with the livelihood subcommittee at each VLO level so that livelihood action targets are met. The monitoring subcommittee will look at the health of the SHG and VLO and ensure that all necessary steps are taken so that the health of the SHG VLO are maintained. So this is what needs to be done as the last step of the annual action planning. This brings us to the end of this module. I hope this module or this video tool will help you in conducting the module successfully at the village level. We'll meet up again in the last module of this series, which is the module on leadership training. Thank you. Best of luck.